And the week after.
And the week after that.
We only have two. Why whatever operation is the correct one or. No, I
Like,
well, you can, but then they have to
Okay.
justify. No, listen, I don't make them do it all the time.
Okay, okay,
But like, I knew I needed to multiply because
okay.
blah, blah, which is said in the problem. No, like, this isn't like word, no, this isn't like word problems, like story problems, not like basic
Each other and
complications.
whatever, okay.
Yeah, I don't.
I'd like to get everybody out of here before the Kraken game is on. It is 6 p.m. on the 2nd of May of 2023. This will commence the Buckley City Council study session. As such, we all have a agenda in front of us. And it looks like first up is a presentation from South Sound 911. And if you did not know, that is what our fire department and our police department is hooked to for dispatching. And when people within our community call, that is where the call goes to and it's dispatched out of there. So please, ma'am.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the introduction. You hit the nail right on the head. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. I'm Deborah Grady, the Executive Director of South Sound 911. And last year, our board chair, Julie Dorr, and I felt it was important to initiate an outreach to our partner agencies. So we refer to the police and fire agencies that we answer 911 calls for and provide dispatch service to. So we've been out since last year. We've got probably 6 out of 38 partner agencies left to provide presentations to, just as an opportunity for you to hear about us, make that connection. I left some cards with your city administrator. As our board chair, she has a conflict with her council meeting this evening and she couldn't make it tonight and sends her regrets to you. But so what I was hoping to do today was just make sure I got the clicker going.
Yep.
Okay, is just share a little bit about who South Sound 911 is, who we are, what we do for your residents and your employees. The journey, some of you may be familiar with the journey of South Sound 911, how we got to where we are today. And then I'll talk a little bit about our operations and support services, and then just give you a glimpse of our future. So when we talk about who South Sound 911 is, we're a public safety answering point, like police and fire departments. We have a lot of acronyms. And so we're referred to as a PSAP or also an Emergency Communication Center, an ECC. So what that means is all the incoming 911 calls for Pierce County are routed to South Sound 911 and are answered by our staff, whether they be for a police, fire, or medical situation. We also have responsibility, and 2022, the Pierce County Council took legislative action to transition responsibility of the 911 program office for the county to South Sound, which made sense because now that gave us the opportunity to interact at a larger level with the state 911 program office on behalf of 911 services in our county. There are other 911 centers in the county where they're referred to as secondary 911 centers, meaning the calls will come to us and then they potentially get transferred to those. And so we interact with those centers pretty regularly. At the federal level, we are working with Joint Base Lewis McChord to replace their aging 911 system. We also interact with the Mount Rainier Ranger Station at the state level with the Washington State Patrol, and then locally with Tacoma Fire Department. And also last year, we initiated an outreach to the Puyallup tribe to see if we could help them secure some funding to replace their 911 phone system. They're currently on a system. We transfer our 911 call to a 10-digit line for them, and they lose data that comes across on the 911 calls when we do that. So we're hoping that'll be a good project for us. Also, our agency provides some level of records and technical services to numerous of our partner agencies, and I'll talk about how that impacts you here in just a little bit. So the South Sound journey, and please, this is a study session, so less formal. I'd like for you to ask whatever questions and have it be participative. So if you have a question and you like to talk and have a discussion, just let me know. Happy to answer any questions anytime. So in 2010, there were 6 911 centers in the county. The predecessor to South Sound was referred to as Lisa. Your city had its own 911 center, as did the cities of Fife and Puyallup. West Pierce Fire and Rescue had Firecom. And then, of course, Tacoma Fire had a communications center. In 2011, members of public safety, elected officials, and the community all got together and successfully were able to pass Proposition 1, which is a 0.1% sales tax, and was the foundational funding necessary for South Sound 911 to form. These visionary folks had envisioned a consolidation of 911 services, which is how South Sound came into being after the passage of Prop 1. So last year, in 2021, my time goes by fast. In 2021, we moved into the picture on the right-hand side of the screen of the new communication center on Pacific Avenue there in Tacoma. And the vision really of getting all the 911 centers and our staff into one location was realized when we were able to move into that facility. Prior to that, we had 4 separate locations, and it made it one of our core values is unity. It made it a little challenging to promote unity as our core value when we didn't have everybody in the same place. So with that, I would like to invite you all to a tour of the building if you would like to see it. The picture on the left towards the top is just an overview, a bird's eye view, if you will, of our communications center floor. It's very impressive and really technology heavy, and kind of takes a Star Trek look to a whole new level when you see all the technology that the employees and the staff are using. So be delighted if you wanted to work with your city manager to set up a time when you could come tour the facility. Very happy to do that. So the Proposition 1 funding, I'm sometimes asked what its specific uses are. It's for anything related to emergency communications. So we're governed by a board of directors. They're all elected officials. I have the privilege of working for 11 elected officials from throughout the partner agencies. Currently serving in board leadership roles are Julie Dorr, a City of Puyallup council member. She is our second longest serving board member at this time. And then we have Commissioner Pat McGilligan from East Pierce Fire and Rescue. He is appointed by the Pierce County Fire Commissioners Association to represent small fire districts that don't have a seat on the board. And so that's specifically why the association appoints a fire commissioner to the South Sound board. In addition to the chair and vice chair, we have several other members here, of course, 2 from Pierce County Council, the county executive, and the County Council representative this year is Robin Denson. We have 2 Tacoma representatives, Joe Bushnell and Sarah Rumbaugh. 1 from Lakewood, Michael Brandstetter, who's the longest serving board member, as well as the rotational positions that represent the smaller jurisdictions that do not have a direct seat on the board. The seats rotate between right now Sumner, Fife, and Bonnie Lake. Currently, Sumner Mayor Kathy Hayden is serving, as well as Pat Hulsey from Fife. And so those positions are designated as the outreach positions or the outreach board members for any small jurisdictions that don't have a seat on the board. If you had any questions, you'll soon be getting a letter explaining, making sure you're aware of that your city's aware of that. Or of course, board leadership is always welcoming of any questions or interaction if you had any for them. And of course, staff, I'm always available if you need anything. Please don't hesitate to reach out. The board seats are assigned by the last year's cost allocation that is determined by a formula for our agencies related to the 911 call taking and dispatch services. Much like your council, there are a couple of advisory or work groups to the board. We have a finance committee and we have a public safety communications operations committee that is comprised of all our police and fire chiefs. And so we meet with them bi-monthly, and the board of directors meets once a month. The finance committee also is on a monthly meeting schedule. So some of the things that are responsibilities of our board of directors, they approve contracts over 50,000. They adopt our annual budget. They approve and authorize capital projects. And 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to be hired by the board. And so they selected me as the executive director when the first executive director retired. So I was really happy about that. No questions so far? No? Okay. So when we talk about what we do, we'll talk about operations first, because that's the area where our call handling occurs from members of the community and the connection between the community members and the field responders. So South Sound provides 911 and non-emergency call handling for the jurisdictions. And in addition to the voice calls to 911, text to 911 service is available. And for those individuals that cannot either safely make a voice call to 911, are out of cell range for a verbal call, sometimes text will work, or the community that most benefits from text to 911 is anyone that has a difficulty hearing or difficulty with speech. Text to 911 is available. Yes.
Do you see a lot of adoption of the text 911?
Did we see a lot of
Adoption of it, or a lot of people using it?
Well, the motto or the slogan for text to 911 is call if you can, text if you can, only because the voice call gives us more information. Sometimes there's background, all of our lines are recorded, but we see between 300 to 400 text sessions or text messages from callers monthly.
Okay.
So compared to our 911 call volume is very, very small.
Yeah,
And again, that's what we would encourage and promote.
thank you.
You're welcome. So there are work assignments on the dispatch floor, the 911 call takers, and then we have primary radio groups that dispatch the calls for service for police, fire, and medical. The protocols for response plans or how calls are going to be handled are set by the partner agencies. And so those might differ from entity to entity based on resources, philosophy, and just how they want to interact with the community. We have a secondary radio talk group that we refer to as data dispatch. So if you have a police officer that makes a traffic stop and wants to check a person for wants or warrants, they'll switch over to data dispatch so that the primary dispatchers can continue to push out calls for service.
So my question is, back in my prior life, you had primary radio, we had 4 zones, and data was only, we're talking about one person. Or because you serve all these other agencies, there could be multiple people
Sure.
to do the warrant checks, the VIN checks, or whatever the case may be.
Correct.
Thank you.
And then this slide is just to share with you what the flow process is for a 911 call. We're really proud that in 2022, we adopted an initiative that had been recommended by one of the consultants early on, and also is considered best practices in 911 call handling, and that is to reduce or minimize transfers. Anytime you would have a transfer call, then the caller is asked, where are you? What's going on? And it's very frustrating. The caller experience is not really great when you're having to transfer them back and forth. So in 2022, the initiative for us was that the calls, 911 call, no matter what kind of call it was, it would stay with the call taker who picked up the call. Where prior to 2022, because we had still just merged people in, we had fire call takers. So the calls would be screened and then transferred to somebody sitting right across the room to finish handling the call. So today the call taker will handle all of the calls that come in. And then while they're gathering information, they're entering information into a computer aided dispatch center. So as they continue to ask the caller questions, it's not delaying the response because it's already been routed over to whether it be law or fire and the right dispatcher that's handling that jurisdiction for dispatch.
Just clarification. Again, where I come from, the call would come into police 911. And if it was a fire thing, it would be transferred to fire.
Correct.
So South Sound 911 is doing both. They triage it there and then they send it to where it needs to be.
Correct.
Perfect.
All right, this slide is to, sorry about that, didn't mean to run into the desk here. This slide is just to show you how busy we are. We are a busy 911 center. And in fact, for 2022 and so far this year, we've received the most 911 calls of any 911 center in the state. And so you can see between 2020 and 2021, we saw an increase of 911 calls. We saw an increase in 2022 as well. And so far this year, we are on track to have another year where we see an increase from the year before. So during the pandemic, when the call volume was kind of staying steady, and then as things were coming back online, is when the call volume started increasing. I'm really appreciative that the board of directors took our recommendation to increase our staffing in order to be able to meet the call volume, as there's a national answer standard that we're very proud that we exceed. As of this year, we've started exceeding the answer standard just because we've gotten people hired and trained and up to speed. But I'm also very proud of our employees who answered that level of calls. It's over 50,000 a month.
Great. What is the national answer standard?
That within 95% of the time, 911 calls are answered within 20 seconds.
Okay.
How does 911 handle the caller who English is not their native language?
We have access to a translation service. We call it Language Line, and have over 250 spoken languages that we can connect the caller to.
And is there a test for your employees as far as verbal, freedom of accents to the point where they can be easily understood by the victim, quote, or whatever?
There's no test specific to
No
that.
screening at all?
No, well, they screen as they normally would a call. And if someone says they can't speak English, or they're speaking another language, we'll ask what language. And then hopefully at least or they make an educated guess. And
I meant to
sometimes-
reverse. I'm sorry. I didn't make myself clear. The employee, if they have a heavy accent, are they hired, or do they have classes and training for proper clear
Oh, I see.
pronunciation or pronunciation?
We haven't had that be an issue at this point. And so there's quite extensive testing to get hired along with backgrounding, but we haven't had that be a concern.
They probably hesitate to apply if they had heavy accents and knew it. They would know it. Yeah, I just wondered if that was if there's any on your staff who handles training for not just general training. But thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so on the record sides for some of the law agencies, we have a division of our organization we refer to as support services, which handles records and technical services, our IT staff. So our agency, we operate a public counter, and we have the public come in every day of the week, except, let's see, I think Sunday, for fingerprinting for concealed pistol license permitting. Your agency handles that themselves, but some of the other agencies contract with us to do that. In addition, we release reports. Citizens come in and request copies of reports, or we have a disclosure unit that is pulling audio from 911 calls and reports. For the city of Buckley, we provide access to a records management system. You may have heard that your police department is looking forward to the replacement of our very aged and need to be upgraded records management system. So that is currently underway and is going to be a heavy lift for our law enforcement agencies. But we provide access to records management, as well as we do some warrant entry for your agency. The cost for the service on this side for your agency is about $40,000 a year. So, and we'll talk just a little bit about finances and human resources. So this is our 2023 budgeted revenues reflected. So we have just about a $57 million budget or revenue forecast for this year. Where that money comes from is indicated in the pie chart up there. But when we talk about allocations, those are the fees for services that the agencies pay to South Sound. And out of the 57 million, the 24 million comes from allocations, or 42%. 41% is the 0.1% sales tax at 23 million. The 911 excise tax, so that's the tax that is on every device that can access 911. That is expected to generate $9 million this year. And then our front counter generates about 550,000. So there's two formulas. Well, actually, there's three that would impact your city. There's a records formula to see how much we would charge to City of Buckley for records and support services. That's based on your commissioned officers. The fire formula for fire allocations to provide call taking and dispatch for fire is 30% of the agency's assessed value and 70% calls for service. On the police side, it's 85% of calls for service and 15% of the city's population. So of the total 24 million allocation that comes into South Sound 911, the total that we have for City of Buckley for this year is $150,000, broken into records, law, and then fire. And your call counts that we have for 2022, which will be reflected in the 2024 assessments that come out, approximately 900 fire calls and just over 10,000 police calls. This slide is just to demonstrate where the money is spent. The heaviest expenditure goes to our communication center floor. Of our 257 employees, 150 are assigned to the communication center floor. So it's our biggest population of employees. Plus it's the most heavy technology used environment. And then administration and support services. For personnel and recruiting, we are currently budgeted for 257 employees. Our employee count, we're constantly recruiting and hiring because we can typically have turnover in a 24/7 environment. We're very happy that our call takers are overhired at this time, which is a huge accomplishment for our agency. And that work group of employees is the pipeline then into the dispatch functions. And so we have to get the call taking staff up and running and enough to be able to handle the phones, and also then move over into law and fire dispatch. So you may have seen we are pretty aggressive on recruiting. We have ads and we had the buses driving around with slogans. If you know of anybody who might be interested in a public safety career but wants to sit inside behind a computer, please have them reach out. We're happy to talk to anyone who wants to come work for us. We have a very active community relations team. If you don't follow us on social media, you could. We have a presence on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Our social media content changes pretty quickly. They're constantly refreshing and updating it. It has 911 educational tidbits. It also has employee spotlights and then things going on in the community. Last year, we started a community volunteer program, and we were really thrilled that we had 3 community members want to come and work with South Sound 911, and they generously donate their time to us. So it's pretty fun. In addition to the community relations team that goes out in the community, so if your police or fire department is having any community events and wants us to come set up a booth, National Night Out is an example. We go out and support the partner agencies there. In addition, our employees, they're very dedicated to public safety and the community and the jobs that they do. They started an in-house employee-driven charitable giving group that we refer to as South Sound 911 Cares. And so throughout the year, we'll have donations and drives to collect either food or money or toys or back to school supplies for kids and then donate them out into the community. So if we talk about our future, I already mentioned the records management system replacement that's ongoing. Another ongoing project that we should see actually get implemented and deployed is the interaction of embedding a 988 crisis call taker in with and on the comm center floor with our 911 call takers. And so we signed a contract with Volunteers of America, who's the crisis provider here in Pierce County. They're not volunteers, they're all paid staff, and they're all trained to meet the RCW for being able to handle callers in crisis and get them services. But the intersection of having 988 work with us is in hopes of getting people connected quickly to the services that they're needed. The statistic that we have is that about 90% of the phone calls that they handle, they're resolved at that phone call level and don't result in any other need for or field responders to go and respond out. So we have interviews. One of our ops managers is participating in an interview this week with who we hope is going to be the first person to come in and work with us. Also, our work environment, as you might imagine, our employees hear a lot of terrible things and listen to a lot of traumas on the phone. We think there will be a secondary outcome of just having a crisis person be able to be there to support our staff, our 911 staff. We're intending to remodel the prior law enforcement call taking and dispatch space into a backup facility in case we ever needed to relocate from our current building. That's underway and going out to bid this month. We also are always tracking next generation NG 911 initiatives, the Joint Base Lewis McChord project. We were successful in being awarded a grant from the state 911 office to replace JBLM's equipment. None too soon, as about a month ago, they had some equipment fail and it's end of life, no parts available. Fortunately, we were able to find some salvaged parts and get them back up and running while we're waiting for the June cutover of their new equipment. We talk about how can artificial intelligence perhaps help us route calls more quickly, or what that service might be able to provide. We're talking to other 911 centers about posting spots if there was a 911 outage, say in Thurston County or the South King County 911 center, it's referred to as Valleycom, that they could come and work and route their phones to us, and they could send their staff down and work in our facility. Right now, if there's a state outage, by default, the calls get routed to Spokane. So if there's a west side outage, they get routed to Spokane to handle. And if there's an east side outage, they get routed to a few 911 centers on the west side. So we just think it's better to keep all the calls here where people can get to them and be able to have them managed. And Spokane, there's been a couple of times they've taken our calls for us, and they're really glad when we take them back. It's because of our call volume. And then I don't know how familiar you are with the radio systems in Pierce County, but there are 2 radio systems. One is owned and operated by Pierce County, and we refer to that as the 700 megahertz system. There's another radio system that is owned by the city of city of Tacoma, and it has a subsystem for the city of Puyallup that we refer to as the 800 megahertz system. And so having 2 systems isn't as efficient as having a single system for both our staff and field responders. So those discussions started last year. There's currently work being done to receive a quote from Motorola to find out how much it would cost and what work would have to be done to have the 2 systems operate and perform as a single system. So more to come on that. And that concludes my presentation, unless you have additional questions.
Questions, comments from the council?
I'm curious about the artificial intelligence. Has
Yeah.
there been, I've just been hearing, the more that they talk about it, just about that it could possibly take jobs away from people. Do you see it just as what they're talking about, just routing them faster, or actually like artificial intelligence? Okay.
I don't see it taking
Okay.
the place of our
Actual
call
people?
takers.
Okay.
Yeah, what we're hoping is it something along the lines of a more robust and comprehensive, maybe phone tree. So if
Mhm.
people on non-emergencies are calling, more quickly can get them if they need to go to. We get a lot of calls for just questions and referrals that go someplace, and so maybe it would be helpful there. We also have an automated for our fire dispatchers. When the fire call gets entered, we have an automated voice, like we call her Siri, the Siri voice that goes out and automates just the initial part of the dispatch to let the fire units know that there's a call and what type of call it is. And then the dispatcher picks it up after that.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you mentioned that the 988 and crisis calls could be kind of repurposed also like to handle in-house, the stuff that comes along with dealing with the trauma all the time. Do you have anything in place now? Like what kind of resources do you have now for that kind of thing?
We do, and thank you for asking that question because it has become very recognized that the job of the call takers and dispatchers can affect them with cumulative traumatic stress disorder. And so on in-house, we have a peer support team.
Okay.
And that's an employee-based team, but we also have access to a regional peer support. So if something happened internally, we had a employee pass recently. And so we brought in an external peer support team this came from King County. And we likewise, if King County had something, we would reciprocate and send our peer supporters up there. That team is led by the psychologist that does our psychological evaluations, and he regularly meets with them to go over training. And we brought in last year, we had a real emphasis on resiliency and how to be resilient, especially in this line of work. So we focus on that. In addition, anytime there was a deputy that got killed over a year ago, and we'll bring in chaplains and also people to come in and debrief with our employees, facilitate a debrief with them. And of course, through insurance, and they have access to their own counseling and EAP services, but
Sure.
we really recognize the toll the job can take on people. So we're trying to put as many resources as we can.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
One last question, based on the staffing numbers that were up there, is it fair to say that the call takers and dispatchers are not being subjected to a massive amount of mandatory overtime?
Not correct. With the call taker group, that is true. I just was talked to an employee a couple days ago. It was a call taker. And I said, well, how are things? And he said, good. Do you know, I haven't had any overtime since December. And I'm like, December, really? And he, yeah, I might get a day, but there's so many people that want it. I don't have to work. I haven't worked any overtime since December. And that really is, it just made my day because we've worked hard to get there with that particular group. On the fire dispatch side, not a lot of overtime there at this particular time, and their staffing is pretty good. On the law dispatch side, that's where we're in what I would call a critical situation in that our law dispatchers are being subjected to mandatory overtime. Not okay, not where we want to be. We knew the long game was we have to get the people here, get them trained, and it's a process. It takes time to get them trained on call taking, learning all the technologies, and then transition them into dispatch. So we're hoping that this year that we're able to really make some significant headway with the dispatch staffing.
That helps with the stress and I mean, some people like the overtime. Being familiar with this process, being told based on seniority that you got to stay or whatnot affects not only your family. That's why I asked the question. And so if we can get to that point, I mean, that would be optimal. And then the person who wants it, if it's there, they can get it. And those that want to stay home and rest. Any other questions or comments for our presenter? Thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The next item under C, discussion items, would be a review of that lovely Saturday that we had here with the wonderful gentleman who facilitated it. And this, if it wasn't for him and the way he facilitated it, I don't know if I could have got through it. So you got a handout to go to.
And Zach Ratke is joining us via Zoom.
Good evening, if everyone can hear me, I hope.
We can hear you.
Yes, sir.
All right, were you going to introduce Courtney, or we just want to launch right into it?
No, you can launch right in. Thanks, Zach.
All right, I know that the Kraken are coming on, as mentioned earlier. I lament the fact they beat my Avalanche, but we'll get going so we can get the game there. Yes, great to be back with everyone. I know we had a great weekend on February 4th. Just a great Saturday. We got a ton of stuff done. Since that time, Courtney and I have been working along with some check-ins among yourselves as well on refining some of the goals, mission, vision, and projects that we had going on with all of everyone here. So tonight we're here to just take a visitation on what we have going on and what we came up with, and just field any questions and any comments and discussions. So what you have in front of your screen are the mission and vision statements that were done a couple of years ago, but then we refined them, did a little wordsmithing throughout that retreat in February. And what we came up with, as you can read, for the mission, the City of Buckley will provide quality services in an efficient, accountable manner that strives to balance economic vitality, preserve our rural character, and natural surroundings. Same with the vision, and then I'll take questions or any comments after that. The City of Buckley is a natural heritage community, meeting the needs of citizens through preserving and enhancing quality of life. So we've had a couple of months to think about it, and some time to kind of look at some of the notes and some of the materials that we published since then. And any questions or comments on these?
Questions, comments? I forgot that Councilmember Anderson is on Zoom. And
Yes.
I hope I did not miss anything in the last presentation, but I know that she's savvy with Zoom. Councilmember Anderson, anything?
No, thank you. I am here.
Perfect. Perfect.
All right. Well, let's move forward a little bit. We started February 4th in the morning with a huge list of goals, projects, and strategies, but it was all on one list. through our discussion, through our facilitation, we did a lot of storyboarding. We did a lot of categorization. We did a lot of organization of what we had and distilled it down to 7 primary goals for the city of Buckley. We have be financially sustainable, improve traffic on Highway 410, revitalize Main Street, public safety, preserve Buckley's identity, assess and address growth, and encourage indoor and outdoor recreation. From our distillation of everything in our discussion, this captured a lot of what the city council and the community goals were. Do we have any questions or comments on these?
Council member comments or questions for Zach? Please continue, sir.
All right, then. So now we have a major list of projects here. I believe Administrator Brunel has handed out a handout with some of this information as well. So for the sake of death by PowerPoint, I'm not going to read all of the projects, but a lot of this was directly gleaned from the list and the facilitation that we did, as well as some discussions after the facilitation. But the projects here are lumped into one area. They're manageable, they're specific. Some of them are finishing up projects that started before. Some of them are time constraint, but they give you a deadline to get them complete. The biggest one I think I could see for a deadline one, fund and complete Miller Park by end of 2025. Some great communications one, like establish and maintain a newsletter or magazine, hosting open forums on specific topics, great community involvement in Buckley. I think you guys have a lot of great projects, and these, as we talked about, can be things that your staff can do, your community can take on, but it can also guide your budgets in the future as well. Any questions or comments or any changes you see on any of the projects?
Comments, questions? Please continue, sir.
All right. So this just ties it together. As promised, as part of this effort, we wanted to make sure that we've got a single document that was graphically designed that shows this is everything that the city of Buckley has. It distills the giant list, the workable list of every item that comes to mind into a single document. Now, this document can be utilized on your website, on your social media. We do have poster-sized versions you can print, hang in your city council chambers in your public buildings. But it ties together our mission, vision, goals, projects, and then down below, the refinement of the guiding principles. Buckley being a livable and healthy community, a safe community, a vibrant community with sustainable governmental excellence. And the strategies to achieve those goals, obviously the biggest thing that we talked about, and I remember it, and I love working with the council, all of you on the council, because you are all interested in prioritization and execution of your goals and projects. Execution was a huge thing. You have a bright future ahead and a lot of great projects, but make sure that your primary strategy being prioritize and execute is going to be a fantastic approach. Communicate regularly and consistently, work with external organizations and form ad hoc committees, great strategies, sums it up into one document to share with your community. And I'm really proud to have worked with everybody on this. And yeah, any questions so far? This is our last slide just to kind of introduce some things. Anything I didn't cover, Administrator Brunel?
I don't think so. Thank you, Zach.
All right.
Councilmember Green.
Just one thing on the mission statement, still reads funny to me, like it's missing an and or.
I think
comma,
strives to
something.
balance economic vitality and preservation of our rural character and natural surroundings is grammatically more correct.
That needs to, yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds weird.
Yeah.
Okay,
Heavy loaded sentences, sentence.
so
Okay.
we will wordsmith that before we have
Okay.
final adoption to
Okay.
make sure that it passes the fifth grader Robin Hood. Yeah, that's good. And then
I
the
made
other
that
item that
note.
had talked about was when I brought this forward, I think it was a month or two ago, we had 5 top goals.
Mhm.
And then we added public safety and financial sustainability, which now gives us 7 goals. And do we want to look at dwindling those down? Ideally, we had talked about 3 to 5 top goals to focus
Mhm.
on. And that doesn't mean that we eliminate the other goals. It's just that for marketing purposes, we have some top goals.
I mean, or you could just put another bullet here and have 4 on each side.
Okay, that's another way to approach it.
You get eight goals.
Evenly balanced. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for the gentleman online?
No, but I have a comment about.
Okay.
I feel like. Okay, so you said some of them might just not be our top goals, but that it doesn't need, so it doesn't need to be included on this, but it's still,
A goal.
okay. My personal opinion is that one of them that I don't, in my opinion, that doesn't need to be a top goal, but it's still something that we want to do is the encourage indoor and outdoor recreation.
Mhm.
That's just my own, because like financially sustainable, yes. Public safety, yes. Like, I don't know. I want to encourage indoor and outdoor recreation, but I don't know if that's,
Mhm.
those other ones are more important to me than that one, but
Could we also maybe combine, assess and address growth and preserve Buckley's identity into one?
yes.
And then
'cause
that would
that's
give us a
basically what it
top line.
is, right?
Mhm.
Because revitalizing Main Street is still, in my opinion, it's revitalizing it, but it's also keeping the identity of that historical district is what I was, don't, right? Or am I thinking of something different? Okay, I don't know.
And I think when we were talking about the indoor and outdoor recreation, we were talking about the pros plan that was outdated. We were talking about maybe some additional theaters.
Yeah.
That sort of thing was what we were talking about back in February, but
Yeah.
we can certainly table that for now.
Because we do already encourage outdoor, well, I guess not recreate. I'm just thinking we have outdoor like activities and things like that the city already does. It's not recreation per se,
And we
but
are a trail community.
I would say that based on what this document has captured, we're talking about a couple items that could be knocked out
Yeah.
within the first half an hour or probably less at another study session. This was a presentation from the gentleman here as a follow-up to our retreat, which I appreciate, and I appreciate what has been said here and how this could be condensed into, instead of 7 down to 5 for marketing. So it's not a run-on sentence, if you will, even though that's not the proper thing, but in the context of a run-on sentence. And grammatically correct the mission statement before final adoption. The vast majority of the work was done on that day. Am I wrong?
no, I think you're correct. I think she's just asking if we can agree on some to just not include now, you know what I mean?
And I thought
Yeah.
what was suggested makes perfect sense. And Councilmember Anderson, anything on this? Probably correcting papers.
So for us, for next steps, while she unmutes herself, and please interrupt me, Councilmember Anderson, is for us to hopefully approve this via resolution and adopt it via resolution. So that'll be our tentative next step. So in between now and then, or even on that date, we can make some last minute changes or continue to revisit this. But I will, given the feedback tonight, take encourage indoor and outdoor recreation off of the top goals list, put it back and make sure it's memorialized in the major draft report, which will become the retreat report, and combine those two as well as revise the mission statement to make sure it's grammatically correct.
I'm even wondering if we don't even need to combine those two, to be honest, because in my mind, part of preserving Buckley's identity has to do with assessing growth, that it
Right.
doesn't get out of
So
control. Do you know what I
just
mean?
strike it.
Because I think, I don't know, that's how I view it.
Right.
Part of Buckley's identity is that we are a smaller, I don't know. Like, I don't know.
This preservation of what we have and then.
Yeah,
And then keep in mind that we want it to look like what we have already.
Yeah.
When we do it.
yeah.
It'll be
I don't know.
brand spanking new.
Great.
Yeah.
Mackenzie, oh, she was unmuted. Oh,
Sorry, yes, I did unmute.
no, you're good.
I was actually going to say what Councilmember Burbank just said, to leave them actually both separate and not combine them. But I agree that we could take off the encourage indoor and outdoor, as we already are doing this, but it doesn't need to be one of our top goals.
And also
Okay.
along the lines of encouraging indoor and outdoor, you describe that because we have 4 projects that go towards that down here. You got the Miller Park, establishing an arts commission, complete parks, recreation, open space plan, and encouraging growth of performing arts. It all speaks to that goal without, having it be a goal. The projects we're gonna complete, so it's still there.
And I view the coming pedestrian bridge and the fact that we are center for the trail. I think we've done that, and that's going to continue to always count as something we've achieved, but over a long length of time, but we did it.
Great feedback. Thank
Any
you.
other council comments or questions on this? Thank you, sir, for chiming in.
You bet. Great to see everyone virtually, and we'll be in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You don't want me to open it.
No?
Next item is an agreement for museum services for Buckley Hall.
So this is an addendum to the agreement that already exists between the Foothills Historical Society and the city and formalizes their use of Buckley Hall on a continuing basis. The last addendum that was before the city council was for the construction specifically. So now that the construction is completed, we wanted to formalize the agreement between both parties, which is part of an effort that we're doing for a lot of the organizations that we work with. You recently saw one for the Senior Citizens Nonprofit. Next month, you'll see one for the food bank. So just going through this process with our different partners.
Questions or comments from the council? Councilmember Anderson, anything on this?
No, thank you.
Next is something that those of us on transportation and utilities were briefed on last week. It's staff changes that would have been proposed before in budgets and talked about in light of input and whatnot. Let's just go ahead and get into that. You have a staff report.
Want me to go ahead?
Go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So really what triggered us as staff to really look at this is the notification of the retirement of our longstanding permit tech and Devin Boyle. As part of the trying to get ahead of the game and training for that position, the city advertised for that position to try to get someone hired to train that, so Devin could train that person. So when she actually retired, we had somebody that knows what they're doing. That initiated a lateral transfer of a current employee and charity owner, which is currently the utility billing clerk / public works clerk. So she will be transferring to permit tech, leaving a utility billing / public works clerk position vacant. In the meantime, we lost our third meter reader in the last 3 years due to taking a job elsewhere for more money. So that position's vacant. Part of this equation was this year's budgeted position for a city engineer. So Ms. Hines, city administrator Brunel, myself, we all sat down and had a discussion on how to handle this, or, what are the needs? What are the real needs? Well, over time, Devin Boyle used to be the utility billing clerk. When she took the new position of a permit tech, we hired Charity as a utility billing clerk / public works clerk, not knowing the amount of time that it takes somebody to do utility billing work, which is about 90% utility billing, 10% public works. We were thinking that was going to be more of a 50-50 type distribution of task, and it didn't work that way. So the other thing that played into this was utility billing in most cities falls under the direction of the finance director. It's more of a finance position. It's not so much a public works directed position. So we came up with a plan One, making the utility billing clerk a finance one position, which the city currently has a finance one position in Michelle Wagner to handle. You can probably speak to what she handles, her tasks are currently. But we thought of making a second finance one position that would handle utility billing and be able to fill in some of the roles of the current finance one position, and then the current finance person in Michelle Wagner could cross-train and do some of the utility billing functions. So you have some redundancy. So if someone's gone, someone still knows how to do the utility billing. Currently, if Charity's gone, nobody does utility billing. So that made sense to us. I'll jump over to the meter reader position. We hired for that position in 2021. In 2021, that position, the person that took that position lateraled to a parks position for more money. So in 2022, we had a great employee, in my opinion, hardworking employee. Sad we lost him. We lost him because he went to another water district for a lot more money. Well, here we are again in 2023, advertising for that position again. Well, in the meantime, we're transitioning our direct read meters to an AMR meter type system, which is a 3 to 4 year phased project. But it will slowly transition to about 7 days of meter reading to about 3 to 4 hours of meter reading. So the proposal in front of you or the discussion in front of you is to maybe not call this position a meter reader position anymore, but it is we'll call it a utility position, utility worker position. It'll bump the wages up such that we have a better chance at keeping this employee, and the duties we can use, all the time that we're saving for meter reading, those duties can be applied to other things that aren't currently getting done. So then jumping over to the utility, the clerk position, and the engineering position, with the kind of the downturn of economy and kind of the general fund type financial situation that we're in, we don't necessarily see the need for an in-house engineer at this time. That engineer would be more as a review engineer, not a capital improvement type engineer or a public works type engineer. We'd still have to contract that out anyway. So instead of rehiring for a public works clerk, we made this new position called a management analyst, which is I don't know if I'll say this right, but a higher educated person, someone maybe fresh out of school that can kind of take over a lot of the reporting duties and the analytical duties that I currently do, relieving me so I can do the other things that I'm supposed to be doing, with the hopes that this person can do right-of-way inspections, maybe some civil inspections, a lot of right-of-way permit review, like I said earlier, reports, maybe even get into some grant writing, and over time transition into maybe an assistant director type role over time. And it's a cheaper way to go than hiring a city engineer. So the cost savings by not hiring a city engineer would cover the increase in the meter reader to the utility worker wages, and the wages of this new management analyst position. So I don't know if City Administrator Brunel has more to add, but
That was a great job. I'll just point out that the budget impacts overall are on page 2 of the memo, but it's worth saying that this doesn't have an impact to the general fund. Right now, the utility billing / public works clerk is paid for by the utilities. That would remain the same, even though they're moving under finance, because their primary function will remain utility billing. And even with the cross training, we're going to have 10% of their time towards the general fund and 10% of Michelle's time towards utility billing. So it ends up being an even exchange, but that does provide for a little bit want more of that cross training for when this person chooses to take vacation or if they're sick. Why, do you have a question?
So we were talking about hiring for the, what do you call it, the passports?
Yeah.
Is this something where we could not hire that and then this position would be able to do the passports too?
No, that would be separate. Just because right now we're replacing Charity's position essentially, and she is working full-time on just utility billing. There might be additional capacity there in the future once we move all to AMR, but right now we're probably 3 to 4 years out from fully making that transition.
So I will say that Director Banks hit a home run in explaining this, that only 2 of us in the room had this conversation last Tuesday about this. And I can tell you from, well, obviously I live in the city. Mrs. Roner's job is not just billing, it is more than that. And she made a phone call to me over a year ago and says, there's something wrong with your water. It's through the roof. What's going on? She didn't have to do that. I could have just wrote the check. I would have paid my water bill, alerted me that there was something wrong at my house, and I figured it out and it got corrected. And I'm sure that's not the only person that she called.
Mhm.
So we're in a small town and the utility billing person, as far as I'm concerned, does more than bill utilities.
For sure. They deal with escrow companies on the sale of homes and transfer of utilities. They deal with move-ins, move-outs. They deal with new construction. They deal with accounts payable. They deal with turn-ons and shut-offs, non-payments. They deal with quite a bit.
And they have to deal with you.
And they have to deal with me.
And
That's why she's leaving.
They don't need.
And I got a real problem with the Public Works Director, and he's not complaining about it. But he's got to be out in the field. This is like an assistant chief on the police department. Should be out in the field supervising the work. And when you got to do a bunch of reports, and Lord knows the reports to the state, to the feds, all the things we talk about. This management analyst who was rightly stated as somebody who's fresh out of school. They're getting their feet wet in public administration. Is a heck of a lot less than a city engineer.
And they have the hope of increasing their, their job spreads out and their pay will go up.
Exactly.
So I love the idea of working for the city.
Any other comments, questions? Councilmember Anderson.
Go on.
Nothing from me. Thanks, Chris.
You're welcome.
Finance Director Hines is on if anyone. She checked me that even though it doesn't say she's on the iPhone. So.
Okay, moving on to city administrator update.
We will be bringing forward the last item as an amendment to the salary scale to add in a management analyst for the consent agenda for the next meeting. And then I do have just a couple of items. One you may have seen on Facebook that we're currently establishing an eligibility list for a lateral police officer. That is a result of a couple of things. We are expecting a retirement from the department, as well as we're expecting for one of our officers to potentially take a position with another department in the next couple of weeks. So more information related to that will be forthcoming once we're ready to release it. But in the meantime, we're trying to get ahead of it. Right now, the academy waitlist is about a year out. So we are hopeful that we will be able to attract a lateral position. Next, I do want to share that I did speak with the Enumclaw Pickleball Association today. We forwarded on some comments that we had received from the city council. They are still interested in providing a schematic, but we encourage them to instead continue to participate in the Parks and Recreation plan, the PROS plan that's going to be coming forward to city council this summer, to potentially have that integrated in some way through the city council and partner that way rather than as a separate MOU. So I do think that they will be continuing to come forward for input as we develop our PROS plan over this next year. And and then they may continue to come for public comment with interest in seeing a facility, pickleball or other multi-sport sport facility located here in Buckley, if that is the council's will and decision. Third, I'm happy to share that we received our annual Well City Award this year, which impacts our health insurance rates. This is thanks to the work from our Wellness Committee, which is a city staffed committee headed by Chloe Mickelson, and several other staff members from the city are very active. We have monthly wellness events, and it does result in a savings to the general fund because it decreases our insurance rates if we receive it. And this year they actually had several new requirements that they were able to all make sure we met those standards. So that was exciting. And then last, the mayor and I met with staff from Patty Murray's office today. They did express support for the 410 realignment project and gave us a whole slew of grant ideas to work on. So we'll be working with Chris and Dom on that, and also offered to give us a letter of support for any grant that we applied for. So that's also very exciting. That's all I have.
Going back to the pickleball thing, so they're no longer interested in an MOU. Now they want to be part of the parks plan. How does that work?
I think that their interest is in making sure that the council is comfortable with the decision and no longer trying to rush the process.
Okay.
I included in my city administrator update that we found out that the RCO funding was decreased in the third round of the legislative session from what was originally 42 million down to it was 12 or 13 million.
Under 20.
Yes, so significantly decreased on the third version of the bill that was going to Walla Walla and Pasco, I believe, for stadium funding. So they both received large allocations for their stadiums, and kind of the open grant is only 12 million. So with that, the redirection, they're still certainly interested, but they understand the council's and the community's concern and think that the best approach is just to see if the city would like to approach something like this through our own planning efforts, which is something that we had talked about looking at cost generating parks and recreation programs. Is this something that the city really wants? Really just an assurance that there is no longer, from their perspective, a tighter timeline. And so I don't think that they're going to be coming forward and contributing a lot more dollars until the city council makes a decision through our own planning efforts that it's something that we would like to see. And then they are still open to partnering with us. Does that answer your question?
That does. Thank you.
Okay.
As far as pickleball goes, I'd like to point out that all of us here probably received an email from a constituent with the Axios article regarding pickleball and this noise issue. In places that have put it in. And I listened to the council meeting after I got back from my spring break trip where I missed when pickleball was here. And those that said they didn't want to make a decision based on that, no, not everybody was here. I appreciate that. Because this is not a sprint. It's a marathon. I appreciate that very much. And we hope to get Council Member Sundstrom back in the fold here soon. Councilmember Anderson, anything on that from the city administrator's update?
No, I do just like to hear that the Pickleball Association is willing to still work with us, and I would be happy to continue the conversations. I just like that we're not sprinting into something and we're actually taking our time and doing the research. So thank you, guys.
Councilmember Burbank.
Do we have any other updates with the audit or no?
No, and we probably won't until after June. So we have identified a consultant that's going to help us with the bank reconciliation that I spoke about a couple of meetings ago. And then once we're able to make that large change to our financial software, which dates back to 2019, which will then cover the 2019, 2020, and 2021 audit period, we'll be able to have the report finalized.
Okay.
We're expecting, so starting in June, it's probably going to take a couple of weeks, months for them to really complete that project and then get that back to the auditors. They told us that early to late summer is their busiest season for federal audits that they're completing. And so we might not hear back from them until towards the end of the year because they're going to be pretty booked up through summer. Okay, but we'll keep you updated if there's anything else to update. And as soon as that individual gets brought on officially, hopefully in June.
Any other council comments on that? So we're gonna move into city council comments. We have a tradition of going around the room. I'll just go ahead and start and say that city administrator am requesting legislation or an ordinance be drawn up for the BMC to prevent public camping in the city of Buckley. Not because we have an issue right now, because we don't want to have an issue. And there's been issues, I believe, down by the river in the past. No public camping. That is what I think that we need to do. Instead of being reactive. And then you know what that does. Let's just be proactive and put it on the books. There is no public camping. Period. That's my ask. Councilmember Rose, anything?
No, I don't.
Councilmember Rossano,
Not tonight.
Councilmember Green,
No, sir.
Brain dead here.
Councilmember Burbank,
I can't think of anything.
Councilmember Anderson.
Nothing from me. Thank you.
I'm struggling to still remember your name, your new name. So given that, I've got nothing else. We'll just call it 7:10 PM on the 2nd of May. Concludes the Buckley City Council study session.
That's